I want to thank you all for inviting me to talk a little bit today about the work that we've been doing to develop an intervention, early intervention using pretend play for children with Prader-Willi syndrome. So I just have three main learning objectives today. The first is just to highlight the importance of pretend play and early intervention in general, and the good work that's coming out of the typically developing literature there. To highlight the social cognitive challenges in PWS that we can address using play intervention, and then to share out some strategies to boost pretend play and use play as a platform for learning for our kids with Prader-Willi syndrome. The work that I'll talk about today is based on our work that we've been doing for probably about 5 to 8 years now, developing an intervention that we refer to as the PRETEND program, play-based remote enrichment to enhance development. And the goal here is to use play to intervene with school-age children, so direct intervention for children typically between the ages of 6 and 9 years of age, and parent education of best practices in pretend play for our preschool families. And we do this using a remote platform. Obviously, since it's a rare disorder, it's hard to develop interventions with people just in our local community. And so just to give you an idea of the intervention that we've been doing, the structure is an 8-week remote program where the child is either in a direct play session or the parent is engaged in parent education. And then for our preschool families, we also have a component that includes live coaching for our parent-child sessions. And then our play sessions consist of a 15 to 20 minute session where we have particular toys that we've given out to the child. And you can see here that these toys have no lights, no sounds, no whistles, no animations. These are toys that you actually have to make. You yourself have to make them do something. And then we use a number of strategies during the play session to elicit pretend play and build on skills. Our intervention is broken up into 4 modules. We're focused on building emotional understanding, working on emotion regulation and problem solving if the child is up to that level, building play complexity, and then also working on flexibility in play. So we know from the typical literature that pretend play is related to a host of other processes. And so people who show greater strengths in pretend play tend to be more creative, have better problem solving ability, engage in more social reciprocity. And pretend play is linked to divergent thinking and cognitive behavioral flexibility, a number of things that we value in social cognitive ability and that we may want to work on for children who have difficulty with social cognitive processes. So pretend play can serve as an activity base from which we learn these additional skills, practice them in a safe space, in addition to boosting pretend play directly. So our goal with our work is to not only increase pretend play ability with the expectation and hope that it will affect some of these skills outside of play, but also use play as a platform for learning. And so we've seen in the autism literature and in other atypical populations that play-based intervention can be helpful to improve outcomes and to decrease problem behavior. So that is not new. We are just starting to look at it in Prader-Willi syndrome as a method of working on some of the challenges that we see here. And so we know that there's a good body of literature in PWS that indicates that social responsivity and competence are affected in children with Prader-Willi syndrome, that they may more often have rigidity in thoughts and perseveration in their behaviors, and that these social emotional difficulties span multiple domains and over a long time frame. So this may impact peer interactions, initiating peer friendships, parent-child engagement, and certainly long-term quality of life for these social cognitive abilities. In our own work, we started out this journey in developing an intervention because while looking at social cognitive behavior in PWS, we realized that kids with PWS really had a hard time with pretend play. They were really having difficulty engaging more in functional play or non-play activities, more similar to children with autism than our typically developing control group. And then when the play partner joined the play, we saw that there were some opportunities there to improve ability and pretend play skill. So why should we use a pretend play in Prader-Willi syndrome? I really think there's a window of opportunity before hyperphagia comes fully online and before there's an uptick in challenging behavior to use this time period in early childhood to strengthen social, emotional, and adaptive abilities that the child has and build on those skills. We use that play platform to increase flexibility, work on compromise and task switching so that we can reduce cognitive and behavioral rigidity later on. And certainly we hope to foster appropriate social engagement. So our goal with our parents is to really have that session be a more enjoyable session between parent and child, teach parents the best practices for engaging in that space. And I'll share out on some of those strategies today. So thus far, overall, our findings from both the direct intervention and from the parent education platform, what we found is that from pre to post intervention, we see improvement in the organization and the imagination of playability for the people who participate in the intervention compared to controls. So this increase in organization indicates that they're providing more structure and more story layout for the play, and we see these increases in imagination. We also see increase in the amount of affect expressed at post-intervention compared to pre. So labeling and identifying emotions, and also including diversity in the type of emotion that is expressed in these outcome sessions. And interestingly, we also see more storylines generated. So typically, at the beginning of our intervention protocol, we have storylines that we start with. So one of the common ones is, let's have a birthday party, or let's go to the zoo. And so certainly if the child is willing and able, we encourage them to come up with their own storylines. And so as those weeks progress, the child really takes the lead in developing, or deciding what's going to be discussed and played out during the session. So we see more storylines generated during this time period at outcome compared to our controls, and we're really excited to see this idea generation happening. The gains that we're seeing inside the play session, we have seen preliminary evidence to show that these gains are related to increased divergent thinking and cognitive flexibility. So for a measure outside of the play session, kids who are better pretend players are scoring higher on divergent thinking. And so this is indicative of the impact that improved play skills may have on development. And we're excited about this, as this is something relevant that we'd want to work on in Prader-Willi syndrome. We also have preliminary evidence that shows that for children who engage in direct intervention, parents at outcome report decreases in parent-related stress and depression symptomatology on a self-report measure. So we're looking into that more closely. So in addition to looking at outcomes, we're also interested in identifying what in the intervention session is actually working. And so here's sort of our laundry list of strategies that our interventionists use. None of these are novel or innovative. These are commonly used strategies for learning a new skill or teaching a new skill to a child. What we did find, though, is when we did line-by-line video coding, is that some of these strategies precede pretend play more than others. And so the option is basically it either precedes pretend play, it precedes no play, or it precedes functional play. And so the ones that are highlighted were strategies that appear to be making the most impact on pretend play ability. And so in thinking about these strategies, describing the content that the child produces during their pretend play lets the child know that the facilitator is engaged, they're positively reinforcing that behavior, and that they're helping to provide structure and organization to the story. So if you think about an example like going to the birthday party, the child might be acting out the segments there. So the child might indicate that, oh, we're going to put the candles on the cake, and then we're going to light the candles, and then we're going to sing happy birthday. The summarizing and reflecting that the interventionist gives back to the child. So for example, oh, first they lit the candles and then they sang happy birthday, appears to then lead or precede pretend play more often than some of the other strategies. The same thing with identifying and summarizing when the child is using affect in play. So if there's a baby crying and the child is making noises that the baby is crying, labeling that and indicating, oh no, the baby's crying, appears to then precede pretend play more often. And certainly none of this is new news, right? Allowing the child the freedom to lead the play appears to be more effective than directing the play. And so finding that balance between leading play and building new skills, taking that opportunity to build in flexibility and turn taking. I mean, certainly our goal is not to have a session where the child takes a storyline and runs without any intervention at all, right? So finding that balance between having the child lead and then using opportunities to incorporate storyline complexity and flexibility is important. We also see that modeling is important, as it is with much skill building in early childhood. So this can take the form of demonstrating or describing a play skill. So if we take something like object transformation, showing a child how to use an object in another way. So if we take a block and say, oh, you can use this block as a spaceship, or, oh, you know, Sally, my character, is going to go to the moon on this spaceship, allows the child to see how there are opportunities to use object transformation. And then also modeling peer behavior, right? So as you're playing through the story, having the characters make sure that they take turns, right? And so if you, as an interventionist, want to make sure that you're incorporating your play into the story as well, it may be something like, oh, I think sister is sad because she needs to take a turn on the swing too. So working out some of these potential conflicts through modeling. We also use what we call nudges or prompts to encourage the child to use different or new play skills in their play. So something that we often use in these sessions is, oh, show me what happens next in the story, or how is this story going to end? Or is there another way that the story can end, to help that child think about additional possibilities and increasing ideas that are generated. One of the positives that we've seen with prompting is that it does elicit more affect expression than any other strategy. So prompting for affect expression, I wonder how the girl might be feeling, or, how is this character going to deal with the fact that they didn't get this desired toy, for example. So we have found with prompting and questions, there are some that are helpful and some that are less helpful. So more complex skills like naming and expressing emotion has been very helpful. Moving the story along, asking the child to come up with a new ending, very helpful. Less helpful is over-involvement or overly demanding and intrusive. So when we look at our parent-child data, when we have play partners who are, asking too complex questions, or questions that may try to ground the play in reality. So no, a banana can't go to the moon. Why would a banana go to the moon, right? You eat a banana at a table. Those tend to be more intrusive and detrimental to increasing pretend play. And certainly if the child is not motivated or engaged, that's an issue. And so just quickly, Subtle non-directive intervention strategies appear to be better. More directive strategies such as questioning may be potentially too intrusive for this population. However, prompting for emotion seems to be helpful. And so having adults engage as a play partner instead of directing the play seems to be have more impact on pretend play. And final slide, just the things to consider, the child's readiness for intervention. So certainly there is a sweet spot for engaging with a child in this modality. And so we found with some of our older participants, if they are way past playing with toys, then they are not going to be, this is not going to be effective for them. Our findings so far have shown that even within this range of social cognitive ability in PWS, those with lower cognitive score or higher cognitive scores are more responsive, social cognitive scores. And that potential barriers could be challenging behavior, that uptick in challenging behavior for children, and then parenting stress. So even with our direct child intervention, those who had parents who were more stressed were less responsive to the intervention. So these are just some things to consider as you're thinking about adding in pretend play. Thank you.